State Senator Brandon Creighton of Conroe and also chairman of the Senate Education K through 16 Committee. Thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
It's good to be with you, Jack.
So let's talk about this new deal that was struck yesterday at the Texas Capitol on the House Bill 2, the public school funding bill. $8.5 billion in new money for public schools, which I believe is $500 million more than the last update we heard.
That's correct. Yes, where we normally invest in our 2-year budget, session to session, a new dollar amount for our public schools in the $2 billion range. This session, we will be north of $8 billion, closer to $8.5 billion. The total investment in public education will be close to $100 billion.
And that includes federal money too, right?
That's correct. Yes, absolutely.
And so let's talk about this. Is this going to come up for a vote today in the Texas Senate and will it pass?
I believe it'll pass overwhelmingly. Of course, we're always optimistic as we approach the Senate floor with our key priority bills, and we are on the agenda today on the intent calendar for this bill, HB2, to be brought up, and we're looking forward to it. We're eager to get in front of the members and to talk about the highlights of the bill and how it'll help our students and our teachers and our schools.
And before we get to the highlights of the bill, walk us through the process because there was, I guess, negotiations going on last week that got it to your Senate committee last week, which was voted out. So, how did it go from that to more negotiations, and who was involved in these negotiations?
Well, as is the case late in the session for these large bills that have a tremendous amount of funding, dollars, ties to the budget, we continue our negotiations to try to bring as much alignment as we can with the House priorities and the Senate priorities so that we can either avoid a conference committee or that when we come into a conference committee that it's workable, that there aren't so many differing provisions that we just can't land the plane and arrive at a consensus. So I have to compliment the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker, certainly House Chairman Brad Buckley, the House negotiation team, as well as our Senate team of conferees. We've just been working day and night on this bill to make sure that we have a historic bill for our public schools for the future and for future student outcomes. That we're making sure that the particular priorities for safety and early literacy and numeracy, teacher prep and certification, so that our teachers are certified in the classroom, CTE, continuing education and vocational training, career training. All of these things are top priorities in the legislation to make sure that our students are set for the future. And these negotiations have continued from the committee process day and night until today.
What was the biggest difference that House and Senate negotiators had to really, work on?
Well, originally the House had a larger number than our Senate number for the investment, and that number was even larger than the revenue that was certified for the state for our budget. So we had to bring that number back down to where the total budget, not just for education, but the total budget would actually balance. And once we got those priorities set, we also were working on the architecture of how we fund our public schools previously. And there's been a lot of attention on the basic allotment and how much money is included in the basic allotment. The basic allotment is called the basic allotment because it's first. It's the initial start of the funding for our public schools. There are many, many, many other funding provisions tied to how we deploy dollars from the state to our public schools. And so We're focused on different architecture this time. We're focused on a budget that funds key priorities that drives these dollars directly to teachers and directly to the classroom that will affect student outcomes, not to upper level administration, not to priorities that don't lead directly to an impact on student outcomes. And so, what were the major differences? The Senate has been very focused on restructuring the old archaic ways that we deploy dollars to our public schools because our outcomes have just not been meeting expectations, to say the least. You and I have had previous conversations about how our Texas eighth graders are performing below grade level in a large degree. I think nearly 75% of our Texas eighth graders are not at grade level. Many are 2 grades below grade level. That's obviously not what we can continue um, to fund and support with Texas taxpayer dollars and our families, our moms and dads out there expecting good results for those kids. 10 years ago, we put $44 billion into public education. This session, 10 years later, will be almost at $100 billion with only 100,000 more students out of
And
5.4 million. That's just an incredible amount of new investment in public education for only 100,000 more students out of nearly 5.5 million kids in Texas schools. We have to do better with these dollars.
and let me ask you, because if I hear you correctly, Senator, you seem to be saying that the legislature, this new money, the legislature is preferring to direct certain amounts of this funding towards certain either projects or um, parts of the education. So money set aside specifically for special education, money set aside specifically for teacher pay raises instead of a larger increase to the basic allotment, which would give a little bit more flexibility to school districts. Am I hearing that correctly?
That's exactly right, Jack. We're funding specific strategies that tie directly to improving the lives of our teachers and growing the student outcomes and performance more than ever before, and we must. That's our future workforce, our students, our young students, and our families expect it. Put another way, $55 added to the basic allotment represents not even 7% of the total new dollars flowing to public education, to our schools in this legislation. So all the focus on the basic allotment and adding $55 has been focus that has left 93% of the new dollars out of the conversation.
And so I wanted to ask you about that because I spoke with Democratic State Representative James Tallarico earlier, and he said this is still inadequate. He's like, don't be fooled by the $8.5 billion number. It sounds big, but he said Texas is big. He said the allotment, the basic allotment, should be increased by about 13 or $1,400. So what do you say to that?
You know, I think it's easy for Representative Tallarico to say that we should add 13 or $1,400, and it's easy for him to not include that that's north of a $20 billion number. That's just impossible. Our entire surplus, which we may never have again, is barely that number. When we have $54 billion of water projects that are urgent in the queue, immediate projects. We have billions of dollars that need to flow to our Texas electric grid so our schools will have electricity. We have many, many billions of dollars for Medicaid enrollment for a porous, unenforced, wide open border under the Biden administration that has many, many millions of families that will need to be educated now in our public schools that the Supreme Court demands that through their rulings that we do so. To say something like that without tying it to a dollar amount and without explaining that it's just not feasible, I think is reckless and disingenuous. It really takes us off of the focus of the historic manner that we're providing funds for our public schools for the future and the strategies that you mentioned prior that we're focusing on that our kids will benefit from in ways that will be a national model for the country.
Talk to me about the teacher pay raises because that's about half of this, about 4.2 billion, and that also includes other non-administrative staff.
That's correct. We have nearly $4.5 billion of raises in the legislation that will, by and large, lift our Texas teachers up with the largest raise in history for our state, for our teachers. I think the important thing also for the media to focus on, Jack, is that this raise is permanent. The basic allotment increase is not a raise that continues to grow over time. This raise in our legislation for HB2 includes provisions for a new teacher pay allotment that the Senate fought very hard for. It wasn't in HB2 when it came back from the House. And that permanent teacher pay allotment grows over time, where in the past, when we've given a teacher pay raise, it's been a 2-year bonus or stipend.
So this is permanent. So going forward, this does not end.
That's correct. And that's why the focus on the $55 in the basic allotment was misguided. Because if we would have only increased the basic allotment, that would have given a raise that would have stayed the same over time, but it would not have had in growing provisions and that budget refilling that teacher pay allotment cup at a higher amount each and every session that we have a budget. And so, for that reason, those that were advocating for a higher basic allotment were not fighting for teachers in a way that would have helped them more in the future. The structure of our bill now does.
Let me ask you about uncertified teachers. As you know, this has been a real issue in Texas public schools where teachers are getting jobs, they're getting hired, but they don't have any formal training, in classroom training before taking those jobs. And so part of this is to give $135 million to for these preparation programs for preparing new teachers and also phasing out the use of uncertified teachers. Talk to me about that.
Yes, so in the past, we've had uncertified teachers applying for jobs, and some school districts here and there across the state, across our 1,200 districts, have accepted some of those applicants, even though they were uncertified for the classroom. Now there's been a sea change as we are losing teachers from the profession, where many, many uncertified teachers are being hired. And last year, they represented over 56% of the teachers that we added to the classroom. That is just not going to be able to be what we can continue to foster as an environment for the new hires in our classrooms across the state. So this bill will not only provide pathways for teachers to get certified, but it pays for them to get certified and it rewards our schools with incentives to do so. It also makes sure that by the year 2030 that we don't have any teachers in the classrooms for kindergarten, first, second, and third grade teaching our foundational subjects that are uncertified. We just have to make sure that's the case. Again, back to that eighth grade statistic that I mentioned earlier in the interview with 75% of eighth graders performing below grade level. If we don't have certified teachers teaching our littles, our youngest grades, we're going to lose relevance quickly for our eighth graders. And before they even get to high school, they'll feel like school is just not worth the time.
Two more questions, and I appreciate your time. There is a House Bill 1178 that is about these certified teachers, but it's certified teachers from other states, and it would enable them to teach while they come to Texas, and get their Texas certifications. Is that bill stalled? Is that going to make it out of your committee?
Well, we just heard the bill a couple of days ago on reciprocity for allowing teachers in other states to come to Texas and teach. No, I would not say it's stalled. I would say we're working through the process on that bill, and we're meeting daily. So it depends on the members' feedback. There's a few suggested changes to that bill to just make it more responsible and tighten it up to where we can accept teachers from other states and understand that they have the certification and the preparation for Texas classrooms that we expect. That bill's being taken very seriously, but I'll have to report back on where it ends up in the process.
And I also wanted to ask you about another topic that does impact Texas. As you know, early this morning, the U.S. House Republicans narrowly passed the president's reconciliation package. It includes now $12 billion for states like Texas to get reimbursed for their border security efforts, which you brought up a little bit earlier in the interview. And so I'm just wondering, what is your thought about that money, 12 billion, being included for all states to apply for reimbursement?
I think it's very important. Earlier in the session, I advanced a Senate resolution requesting exactly that. And the passage of that resolution and the importance behind it, where we would approach the administration for full reimbursement for our costs on the border, is directly tied to our success in the future for, again, our public schools, for tax relief, for grid security and improving vulnerability there, for our Medicaid enrollment growth, for our healthcare system. So many different things that we fund, including big infrastructure in Texas, is tied to that reimbursement, and we're resolute in fighting for it and getting those dollars back.
Republican State Senator Brandon Creighton of Conroe and Chairman of the Senate Education K through 16 Committee. Thank you so much. We appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time.
Jack.